These gondola pastels are ridiculously small and ridiculously powerful. The color payoff from this set is absolutely unreal. It gives some of the most vibrant, creamy pigment that I have ever used. But there's a catch. They're so soft, layering can get tricky fast. So I'm going to put them to the test in this painting and show you what they do beautifully, where they struggle a little bit, and whether they're actually worth investing in. So let's head on over to the easel and get dusty. All right, let's see how these apply. Ooh, these are very soft. Well, this pastel, this particular stick is very soft. All right, so I'm just going to start with putting in my sky. This nice blue. This is very lovely blue. I'm painting on UArt 400 today. All right, let's see how they layer. Okay, these are incredibly creamy. I'm actually a little concerned about getting enough layers down. These are so soft. All right, this is a really light pink. Yeah, these layer. These are super soft. Like, I think I would struggle to get more layers down, and I have 2, maybe 3 down right now. So I would say this requires a very light hand if you plan on doing some layering, which, because it's a limited color palette, you kind of have to layer to get, you know, the colors that you want or need. All right, so let's see if I blend them a little bit, if I can use that to get some more layers down. That's one of the tricks. If you find yourself running out of tooth, if you're able to blend, you know, depending on what you're painting, obviously, that can help you clear up some more tooth. So this is the white. I don't know if the camera is picking up, but they are dragging the color underneath. I don't know if you can see these little raised areas, but when I make a stroke, it's actually pulling the blue pigment to the side, like I'm almost like sweeping it away, and it's creating these raised, these little lines of where there's pigment. I'm not a huge fan of that, because when I blend or when I'm trying to layer, I like to know that the layer underneath isn't going to move very much, and it'll move a little bit and it'll blend in a little bit with what you're putting on top. But you know, I don't want the layer underneath to move, and I'm using extremely light pressure. Like, that's the level of pressure I'm applying, and it's still pulling that blue pigment off the paper. So that's just something to watch out for. If you really, really love extra soft pastels, I think you would enjoy these because they are incredibly soft. I'm gonna grab a blue earth. I just want to compare. And let me grab a couple other brands really quick. Okay, so I have a couple other brands. I just want to compare how they feel. So this is a Sennelier. This is a blue earth. And this is a Jack Richardson hand rolled. Okay. I would say it feels very much like a Sennelier. So if you like Sennelier, you'd probably like these because they're that creamy softness. The blue earth is about a similar softness, but it's a little grittier, a little drier feeling. And the Jack Richardson is very similar also, this particular stick, but I've noticed like throughout their set, some of them are a little harder than others. But I feel like these are closest to the Sennelier. All right, so I'm going to shift to the grass area and just get some green down. So this particular stick is not as soft as those blues. And you will find that in a lot of pastel sets, the softness is very often dependent on the pigments themselves. Because some pigments are softer, they have to use different binders. So just trying one stick from a brand or a set won't always give you like a fully accurate representation of the overall feel of a brand. And I'm also trying to be much lighter than I was with that first pass I made with my blue. I think I went in a little too hard on that first pass. Just made kind of a typical pressure that I would use, but all right, so I'm liking how these greens are layering. And I'm just using a few different shades of green, and I'm keeping my strokes vertical since this is grass. Now right here we've got some flowers up close in the front, so I'm not going to put any of this down in that area because I do want to make sure I have enough tooth left for when I want to start putting my flowers in. All right, so I'm going to blend out this tree a little because it is in the background and it is kind of blurry. I'm just going to soften this guy up a bit. Okay, and then I'm just going to do some gentle upward blending. And this is really just to kind of soften that harsh edges on some of these where the colors kind of differentiate from each other. Let's keep that, that grassy feeling. Okay, so now that I'm getting the hang of these, I'm really liking them. I love how creamy they are. It's just a really nice feeling. And this green, it's not, as dark as we want it to be, but I think if instead of using like local value, if we come a little bit lighter with some of our mid-tones, that'll trick our eye into thinking that this is darker than it is. So, so like I said, I'm going to try and just stick to this palette. I don't want to like bring in other colors or other brands if I can help it. All right, so we have a lovely red flower floating up here. I'm just going to put in a few of some of the bigger flowers that I can see in here. And I might not 100% follow the colors in the photo. I'm just really trying to just get a feel for this palette. All right, so this one's more pink, a little bit of a more pinky red. There's this kind of a rusty orangey red. This is a really pretty color too. And this square that I'm working on is about 8 by 8. So it's not super big. This tiny size of these pastels, I think, they're gonna, if you break them in half, they're gonna be too small to really hold. So you would probably want to use them mostly on a larger, oh, somebody rang the doorbell, now I got doggy barking. You'd probably want to use them on a larger size. This 8 by 8 is probably as small as I would go. I don't think I would want to go any smaller with this small of a pastel. It can just be hard to hold. All right, so just getting some of these colors down. All right, this is, ooh, that's a pretty pink. So they are still layering nicely. All right, let's try out some of the yellows. There's a nice range of greens, yellows, and blues in this palette. This is a nice, like, golden yellow. This is such a colorful scene. I love this photo. I've been wanting to paint this for a while, and I'm really glad this palette just kind of fit this picture. So, and for those on my Patreon, I will put a link to this photo so you can download it. So I'm starting to feel like I'm a little more challenged now in some of these areas with getting the layers down. All right, ooh, this is a nice, like, lemony yellow. I can use that to brighten some of these up. So I am having to press harder. I might end up needing to add some fixative. So your paper makes a big difference in terms of, like, how many layers you can get down. So I'm using the UArt because that's kind of my typical paper, and I feel like I can do a fair test since I'm used to how the UArt performs. But of course, if you're using a different paper, you're gonna probably get some different results. All right, so I'm gonna try just pulling some blue, dark blue in for some shadows here. And I'm gonna put this dark purple on top. So this is not, like I said earlier, this isn't like, these aren't super dark, but it might be dark enough to kind of trick our eye a little bit. It almost looks like watercolor when I tap, because it just comes off the paper so easily. It's an interesting texture, these pastels. I don't, even though they're, you know, kind of that softness of similar to the Sennelier, they don't act like a Sennelier. They definitely don't have that, they don't perform the same. They're very different. Yeah, I mean, it's creating effects that I've never really seen before with the pastel. I don't hate it. It's just something I'm having to get used to because it's very different. I'm just trying to pull some of the sky back in because my tree was getting a little big and crazy there. All right, so let's soften up some of these flowers. Just with my finger, I'm just tapping. Just to give them a little bit of shape because they're a little too square looking. And then I'm also softening them up so I can put some details in on top of the softness. Is that when you soften something and then come back in with a little more detail, it adds just a really fun level of dimension. So down here where I have more layers of the green, it's definitely more difficult to keep these colors as bright. In the top part here, I don't have quite as much green down. So if you are a painter who does a lot of layering like me, these might be a little challenging to work with. But if you tend to do less layering and more just painting in local color, these might be fun for you. All right, so I'm going to come back in now and just get some of the more, just some details put in on some of these flowers. I'm not going to do all of them. I'm just wanting to see what I can do. And I don't want to break these. So I'm going to wear down a little bit of an edge so I can make some different marks other than just straight lines. So I am, again, having to press a little bit harder, but not too bad. Not like crushing the pastel into the paper. Yeah. So I am struggling with some areas to get the color to really pop. And then in other areas, it's not quite as difficult. See, these yellows don't want to cover anymore. Yeah, I can't get any more layers down here. Okay. I mean, it's coming along. I won't say that I'm, absolutely in love with this set. I think for the way that I personally paint and how I apply pastel, this is a little bit challenging for me because it does not layer the way that I like a pastel to layer. This is a darker brown shade. Use this to kind of tease in some darker areas in here. Don't want this to look like super flat. It definitely needs to have dimension and contrast and different values to show like some of these are, getting shade or they're deeper in the grass. I do see some little clovers down here. Kind of buried in our grasses. Little bits of pinks and purple kind of in the background. And I'll come through and soften some of these ones that are, further in the background. They're a little blurrier, so I want to soften those up. I'm just going to put a little bit of this darker pink in here just to give these some dimension. Flowers shouldn't really ever be just one single color because sunlight shines through the petals. The petals are translucent, and they let light through. So if you just make single color flowers, they're going to look very, very flat and one-dimensional. I know there's not like this dark purple in here, but I'm going to use it down in here just to cool some of these flowers off a little bit. It is a little too bright to use as like a shadow color, but I think I can make it work if I kind of blend it in a little with the pink. And this one is out of focus. This one's a little fuzzier anyways. All right, now let's see how these pastels work for just creating some of these grasses. They do have a sharp edge around the top. I just don't know how long that edge is going to stay sharp once I start using it. It's holding up okay. As I'm putting these lines in though, it is definitely softening up, so I have to keep turning it to really get keep getting a nice sharp line. All right, now we have just a lot of kind of random grass in here. So for those, I like to do more of an upward stroke. Yeah, this is definitely losing its sharp edge very quickly, which I did expect. I'm not surprised by that at all. But all right, so I'm gonna switch to a different green now. If we use different shades of green, it's gonna help create this feeling of sunlight. Some of these are going to be, you know, reflecting lights, the sunshine. Others are going to be a little more in the background. This is a nice, I think I used, yep, I've used this one. So let's bring this in just to give some highlights to our stems. So normally for this, you know, these finer grasses, I would normally be pulling in my new pastels and my whole beans because they're a lot finer and, you know, thinner, and they hold their edge much better. So I wouldn't be struggling quite so much to keep keep these the edge on my grass, but it's okay. So I am gonna just throw some darker blues grasses in here too, just representing our grasses that are more in the shade. And it brings a nice, just a nice feeling to the eye. I'm even going to try like a lighter blue. Trying to really trick the eye into thinking there's a lot of sunlight hitting in some areas and not as much in others. And some of these, there are some really light, like almost white flowers in here too, which I think I forgot to put in. Nice round one right here. There is a nice, very, very nice color selection in this palette for sure. I do wish there were some like really dark values, but you won't find a lot of these general sets with extra darks in them, which is a shame because especially for landscapes, you really need to be able to create those dark shadow areas, and you can't do that without having some really dark colors, of course. So, adding a few little glints of sun, popping off of some of these. All right, and I'm just gonna put few little sky holes into my tree just to make it feel a little more like a tree, less like a big green blob in the corner. Okay, well, I think this was a good test of these pastels. Like I said, overall, they're very, very soft. Layering is limited with them, but brilliant colors, absolutely beautiful colors. The brights and the lights are gorgeous. So overall, I would recommend this as kind of a supplemental set if you like to just do your top layers with very soft pastel like I do. I think this would be a great brand to add into your mix for layering as your top layers. If you like to do, like I just did, like a whole painting with lots of layers, I think these are going to be a little more challenging unless you're really good at picking the right color or you know exactly how to combine colors to get the color you want. This might be a little bit of a struggle. But yeah, let me know what you think. Are you going to try them out? They're not terribly expensive. And I do like their small size for traveling if that's something that you want to do. But yeah, let me know your thoughts. I look forward to hearing. And if there are any other pastels or papers or anything else that you'd like me to try out, just leave it in the comments. I'm always looking for new things to test out. So, all right, we'll see you next time. Take care.